Welcome to Aiken Business Matters. I'm John McMichael, and I have as our guest today someone that if you haven't seen him in person, you have certainly read him in your local newspaper, the Aiken Standard, and it's our Dan Brown here. For Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
You've got quite a resume, and it always intrigued me. I think the first time you and I talked, we started going down things, and you and I have some similar things in our background. You were in broadcasting for a number of years, and you're a reporter now and have been reporting. But I think the one thing that really intrigued me the most, and I've gotten to see that quite a bit, is your humor columns as well. I know you do a lot of the, well, when you work for a newspaper, you report on whatever needs to be reported on,
right.
But you primarily do the government beat for the paper and do a wonderful job of covering the city and things that are going on in our CSRA. We appreciate that point of view that you give us from the standpoint of always being there and covering all the major events and things that are taking place in the city. But you're also you've been a sports writer. You have, I know I never see you when you don't have your camera slung over your shoulder. So I know you're certainly a well-versed photographer. You're an author.
Yes. And
have a number of books to your credit. And you are also a former baseball player.
That's right.
So
a long time ago.
Yeah. And you've been in Aiken now, how long? Almost a year.
Almost a year.
Yeah.
It'll be Labor Day.
Yeah.
It's been a year. And I came here from Charleston. I spent 8 years in Charleston writing for the same company, the same family of newspapers in Charleston, and decided that it was time to get a little closer to home, and home is Atlanta, and that's where all my family is, and I've got a couple grandkids now, so I'm making the trip back and forth to Atlanta about every other weekend to see one grandchild or the other. So I went from a 3-hour or a 5-hour, 300-mile drive to 3 hours, about 150 miles.
Wow. Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I come from Cincinnati, Ohio, so I'm a Buckeye, a big Ohio State fan. Lived there for the first 15 years of my life, and then I moved to Indiana. And I tell people I was held prisoner there for 9 years. It was up cold, flat farmland. The wind blew like crazy there, and went to high school and college there. And then after high school, I got drafted by the Chicago Cubs, and I kind of used that as my stepping stone out of town. And
believe this or not, but when my son was, he's in his 30s now, when he was growing up, his favorite baseball team, other than the Braves, was the Cubs.
Yeah.
And he was big into collecting baseball cards. So I need to find out if you have any baseball cards that are still hanging out there.
I had one. I've got about once every 3 or 4 months on my Facebook page, I pull out the picture of when I played with the Cubs, and I was 19, and I was a lot less. I tell people I'm twice the man I was back then, literally. But 19, I had blonde hair, big old sideburns down to about here, and a 93 mile an hour fastball, which today that's an average fastball when you got guys that can hit the clock at triple digits. You know,
that had to be quite an experience.
It was a real eye-opening experience. I mean, that had been my dream since I was this high, and was to play baseball and to play for the Cincinnati Reds. They were my favorite team, and my grandfather and Pete Rose's dad knew each other, so as a result, and my parents, it's Cincinnati, everybody knows everybody in the town, and Pete Rose was a local boy, and so my first baseball game was, I was 6 years old, and coming down and seeing Pete Rose as a 19-year-old kid playing ball, and because it's ironic that the team, you know, I was asking in an interview before the 1976 draft, they said, well, who do you want to get drafted by? And I said, I really don't care, just as long as it's not the Chicago Cubs. And they were the ones that drafted me, so I think I jinxed myself. But for the Cubs, it was a real eye-opening. It was an experience. I mean, not many people get to do that, and it's something. It's like winning an Academy Award. They can't take it away from you. So.
Absolutely.
But it's been a long time. Well, let's put it this way: it's 76. It's been 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So
you look like you could still take the mound.
I could take it. I don't know how far I'd carry it with me, but yeah, I tell people I've had a couple thrown out of first pitch things, and I tell people as long as they set up a cutoff man between the mound and home plate, I'm good.
Yeah. Heard a trivia question the other day about Pete Rose.
Yeah,
What was the nickname that they had for him?
it was Charlie Hustle.
Charlie Hustle. They couldn't get it,
Yeah.
but I remembered it, and my wife was impressed that I knew that.
Yeah.
So I'll tell her that she'll be doubly impressed to know that you used to play with him too.
Yeah, so like I said, and when I was growing up, basically the ball players would come in. They didn't make the money that they do now, so they would come in and rent houses in and around the neighborhood. So guys for the Reds would be in our neighborhood and in the rental houses, and then we would hang out with their kids, and which we did because they always had the best baseball equipment. You know, we bought a ball. You know, if somebody got a ball, baseball for their birthday at different points during the year, and we would use that ball until we knocked the cover off of it. And then the only thing that was left of it was electrician's tape. So when like Tony Cloninger's kids were playing with us and stuff, and he pitched for the Braves, you know, they always had a endless supply of baseball. So we made sure we included them in the games.
When you were playing, what was the most awestruck that you were in meeting someone?
I met Ernie Banks, and Ernie would always come in and say, "Let's play two," and all the Cubs that were in and around Billy Williams. I watched him, and this was after he was out of baseball, and would watch him hit. But the most awestruck I was Bill Buckner, oddly enough, and he had just been traded from Los Angeles to the Cubs, and he had that ankle surgery. So he was on the disabled list during spring training, and as he was doing his rehab, he would come down to the minor league camp, and he'd hit. And he'd sit there and hit, like say, this was maybe 30, 40 swings, and he'd go, okay, left field, and he'd send 4 or 5 line drives to left. And he says, okay, right field, and then he'd send 4 or 5 drives to right. Then he goes, okay, we're going yard, and then like 3 or 4 pitches, just boom, boom, boom into the trees. I mean, the guy could hit, and that would be the one thing that I learned. That I mean, I could throw hard, and I was a big left-hander, and but what went in at 93 came back at like 104, because I tell people that I got Charlie Browned a lot, and that's when the guy hits the ball back and everything goes flying everywhere. So I knew I was good enough to get there, but there were some really good hitters there.
You didn't have Lucy out there, though, did
No,
you?
I didn't. I didn't have Lucy out there.
Well, what can you tell us about spring training that we wouldn't know from reading about it? Something interesting about spring training, because that has to be a fun time of the year.
It's actually the most terrifying time of a baseball player's life, because when I went there, I was very naive, and I thought, you know, the Cubs drafted me. They signed me with a nice bit of money, paid for my college education. So I thought, oh, I'm in. You know, I'm gonna that they're gonna see me along 3 or 4 years in the minors, and then I'll get my shot with the big club, and we'll see what happens. Well, we get off the plane, and there is actually a representative from the Cubs there that met us as we got off the plane. And they grabbed a couple of the guys, took them off to the side, and basically released them in the airport, handed them a plane ticket, and they turned around and got back on the plane and flew back to wherever they were going. We get out of the airport and we're on the bus. We're like, oh, thank God. You know, okay, we survived that. We get out to the complex. There's somebody else waiting as we get off the bus. They grab 2 or 3 more, take them off to the side, said, we're sorry, we're going to let you go. And I'm like, this is from the airport to the locker room. We had to go through like 2 gauntlets just to survive that point.
Wow.
And they would come in and release you at any point during the season. I never felt safe.
Yeah, so you really didn't have any forewarning about it. It just happened out of the clear blue.
Just happened out of the clear blue.
I guess if you were messing up, really booting the ball a lot, missing a lot of plays, and causing a lot of errors, that you kind of knew what your future was going to be like.
You got about basically an 18-month look. I made the All-Star team my first year. Second year was not real good. I got promoted to high A ball. It was the Florida State League. And I bounced around between different A ball leagues then at that point. and actually the day before, I mean, the spring I got cut, I had thrown like 9 straight shutout innings over 3 or 4 ball games, and they just decided that, you know, I'm 22 years old and my career is done. So it was an eye-opener. I mean,
I'll bet. Now, when did you start college?
the year after I got drafted in the spring of June of '76. Played all summer, and I sat out a year because there was winter ball.
Right.
So I played all summer, all into the fall. Got done at Thanksgiving. Started the fall of 1977 at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana.
Right. And I know if you and I have talked over the course of the months that you've told me a couple of very interesting stories that I'd like for you to share. One of which was that you were compared with David Letterman at one time.
Yeah, and it wasn't real favorable, though. I mean, it was, I actually sat in his chair in a radio broadcasting class, and David Letterman got his start in radio in Indianapolis, 78, 79. So he was maybe 3 or 4 years ahead of me. And then when I was going through Ball State, he was just starting his morning show. He had a morning show first, and I think that was with ABC. And the professor, Darrell Weibel, you know, he's an old radio guy, and he talked in a deep, good radio voice. And I was one that my content on my radio shows that I would do for the classes tiptoed across the line of what would be considered appropriateness in class. And after like the 3rd or 4th show, he said, "Mr. Brown," he says, "you remind me of another man who sat in that chair. His name was David Letterman. And he wasn't a very nice guy either." Though I cleaned that up a little bit.
Yes.
He called me one of those 7 words you couldn't say on radio or TV. But I took that as a compliment, though. So, but yeah, he's been back to Ball State a lot. And I had another brush with greatness, which is probably my reputation here. It's closer to my heart, which is food.
Right.
Was John Schlatter, who is Papa John's. And
Yeah.
he and I shared a marketing class, and I actually was on his marketing team when we did the presentation of a business that we would do, and of course he was the head of that, and he was basically giving us his business plan, Papa John's, and
So it had you actually saw the birth of Papa John's right in college, in class.
And after college, he sold pizzas and made pizzas out of a broom closet in a bowling alley in Indianapolis. And it wasn't until 10 or 15 years later that I'm standing in a Papa John's and I start reading about how this guy came from Ball State, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's him.
Yeah. And you actually had an opportunity to go into business with him too, didn't you?
He at the conclusion of our marketing class, he said, "Okay, you guys, you all owe me $20 a pop for supplies and materials." And we're like, "You're crazy. I'm not giving you $20. I don't even have $20 myself." And he says, "Well, I'll tell you what." He says, "We'll let that slide." He says, "I'll let you in on the ground floor of my business. You give me $100 for stock." He says, "And you'll be on the, we'll get you in on the ground floor." And we kind of gave him the bum's rush, $100? If I don't have $20, I sure as heck don't have $100. So, get out of here. So we kind of gave him the bum's rush out. And like I said, when I'm standing there in that Papa John's and I'm looking at his name on the wall, I'm like, well, I could have been a big stock owner in Papa John's. And another golden opportunity that passed me by.
If we all had that future vision, we'd be millionaires.
That's right. That's right.
Multi-millionaires today, I guess.
Well, the good thing about that, it became a column. So
Yeah.
it became a fanfare column.
After you got out of college, did you start into newspaper right away, or did you go through broadcasting first?
It's funny, I started college as a journalism student and ended college as a radio student.
Okay.
And in between there was motion pictures and some television. Now, I did television work back when they had the real big cameras that on the big tripods, not the little things they got today.
It took 2 guys to push it around.
Yeah.
You need one guy to dolly and one guy to hold on to the
That's
camera.
exactly, and I tell people I always had a face for radio. I didn't have a face for TV, so my stuff was behind the camera. But I started, my life plan was that I was going to play baseball for 20 years and then go into broadcasting after that was done. Well, that didn't pan out, so I always could write. I mean, ever since I knew how to go ABCD or AEIOU, I could write. And So I knew that was the one thing I did well, and I enjoyed it. And broadcasting is just like telling it's a verbal version of a story. So, and I love a good story. So I always will bend somebody's ear on a good story. And so I got into broadcasting, and my shtick, or my thing then was the talk radio. Actually, before the talk radio came, is that me and this other guy, he was basically, if I was called the poor man's version of Louis Grizzard, and then this other guy was kind of a little bit higher up the food chain of a Louis Grizzard type, and we would get together like this and just sit and start telling stories, and we'd knock out 4 hours of airtime and not even wonder where the time went.
Yep, that's the fun part about it. In your broadcasting field, you did. I know you this because we've talked about it before, that you did play-by-play.
Yes.
Tell me how that is. I'll tell you. As a former broadcaster too, I never did or never had the opportunity to do much in the way of play-by-play, and it always intrigued me and amazed me how good most broadcasters are at picking up names of players really, really quickly. And I know in football it's a little different than baseball because you've always got a spotter that's feeding things to
Right.
you. But baseball has always been a good thing. You have enough time that you can really spend some time painting a picture for somebody. And I guess a lot of us in my age group and well, maybe even younger, but I remember going to the barbershop and there was always a baseball game on. You could count on it. If you got your hair cut, there was always a baseball game on it during baseball season. And you got to hear some of the greats do the play-by-play, and they always amaze me. In the Aiken area, on Saturdays we got a lot of Yankee baseball down here. And two guys, my dad used to love to watch them, but he thought that Pee Wee Reese and you know who else was with Pee Wee, don't you?
No, Kurt Gowdy was.
Kurt
for a
Gowdy
while.
was for a while.
Yeah.
And then there was the old pitcher, the retired pitcher that was out there for.
Wade Hoyt.
No, it wasn't.
Not Joe Nuxall.
No.
Okay, who was it?
He used to sing when he was. He used to sing the Wabash Cannonball.
Oh, not Dizzy Dean.
Dizzy
Dizzy
Dean.
Dean. Yeah, that's going way back.
Yeah, well, that was some trivia there.
That was some trivia there.
Now I was very, very small, but I still remember it whenever they'd have a timeout. You know, whenever the catcher was going out to the mound, he'd always start singing the Wabash Cannonball or something like that. It was, but these guys really loved baseball, and it just transcended and made the game so much fun to watch.
Well, and with me in baseball, I came from a radio background, and for me, the baseball experience, I had an old transistor radio, it was leather casing, and it was my great-grandfather's radio. And I would listen to the Reds broadcasts.
On AM.
On AM, 700 WLW. And at night, you could pick up, because you know the everything went down, and then the 50,000 watt stations I would pick up WLS out of Chicago, WWL I think out of New Orleans or St. Louis, KMOX out of Pittsburgh. So you would hear Jack Buck, Mel Allen. My guys were, Wade Hoyt did the Reds broadcasts on radio. Joe Nuxall was his color guy. And for me, the broadcast is, one, to be able to do it right, you've had to play the game. Now, there are some guys out there that jump into this that have never picked up a baseball in their life, and they get the vernacular down. But there's going to come a time during a ball game where there's dead time, and you've got to fill 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And 5 seconds of dead air is an eternity. I mean, so to be able to sit there and like Dizzy Dean, start singing, but to pull a baseball story out of the hat is it just makes it gives it a fabric and a color that you just can't find.
Well, having experienced it too gives you that. It gives that additional dimension to it that a lot of broadcasters don't have to bring to the game. All that experience that you had with baseball, your love of writing, your ability to be able to tell stories and tell stories well. And you call, I think I mentioned this to you before. Somebody recently told me that you reminded them of Louis Grizzard. I didn't know this. I didn't know that history that you had there, being called the poor man's
Yeah, I was
Louis
a poor
Grizzard.
man's because I didn't write for the big newspaper.
There you go.
Yeah.
But just being able to communicate and tell a story is something that is a very unique and a valuable tool. And just communication in general, so much is done in short-term texting today. Reporting on a major level now is not what it used to be. It's more, there's a fine line between editorialism and reporting today. But you've taken all those abilities that you've had, all those life experiences that you've had over your career, and you've transcended it into something that's a very unique. It's something that I think everybody would enjoy doing. And I remember going to some different management meetings over the years, and one of the icebreakers, tell us something you would love to do but you've never been able to do, and you're always going to have a number of people in there say, well, I'd love to write a book. Well, you wanted to write a book, and now you've written 7 books.
That's right.
And I believe you're still working on your last.
I'm working on number 8 right now. I got one. I tell people this, and you got to catch me because I'll talk all afternoon on this. Is that they say, oh, I wish I could write. Well, if you want to write, you write. The only thing that's keeping you from writing is yourself. Right. And a book, and I just happen to have one here, is basically one word after another until you keep writing until lo and behold you got 90,000 words together, and it's a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It follows the same rules as anything else, is that you have to flow, you have to grab the reader's attention. And one of the best writing books, if anybody wants to write, I would tell them, go read On Writing by Stephen King. It's part biography, but it gives you his method of writing, and everybody has a different style. For me, I have to start with chapter 1, page 1, and I got to have a cover first, I got to have a title, and before I can even move forward. So you like to have the framework before I like to have the framework. I can't outline. I get bogged down. It's like putting a peanut butter sandwich into the VCR. I mean, it just grinds it down, and the whole process just grinds to an excruciating halt.
Yeah, I wanted to make one thing clear before we go any further. You don't write under the name Dan Brown,
No,
do
I
you?
can't.
I know it. Tell us about that.
Well, I have to write under D.P. Brown.
Okay.
Because Dan Brown's already been taken.
The Da Vinci Code.
The Da Vinci Code,
yeah.
and I actually had to defend myself, because I remember I worked for a Southern gospel radio station right at the time that the Da Vinci Code came out, and I'm getting people calling in when they find out that my name's Dan Brown. They just start letting me have it. How could you write such a thing? That's blasphemous. And I'm like, ma'am, if I was that Dan Brown, I says, I would not be sitting here. I'd be on a boat somewhere out in the Caribbean or something. And so I can't write as Dan Brown. I did put Dan Brown into my keywords when they searched for me, and I did get a cease and desist letter from his attorneys saying you can't use Dan Brown, so I had to pull that off Amazon.
So any of our viewers that are looking for your material, they'd have to go for D.P. Brown.
D.P. Brown, and I'm on Amazon.
Okay.
I have a writer's page on there that's got all my books, and you just search D.P. Brown on there on Google, and it'll pop up under Amazon.
Well, tell us about what type of genres do you write?
Well, basically, I write romance. 95% of my readers are women from the age between 46 and 54. So I write what I call Nicholas Sparks type romances, but mine are not tragic like his. I mean, I do take you, the whole point of a good story is internal conflict. If you don't have internal conflict, the story dies. Well, Nicholas Sparks has a lot of internal conflict. He also ends with the gratuitous death scene of somebody. Either the woman dies, the dog even dies in Nicholas Sparks' book. So mine are, I like to say, are happy endings, but I do take you on a ride. So I have a romance. I have a real-time thriller that was based on a nightmare that I had, where everybody that I made eye contact with wanted to kill me. So I wrote a 350, in fact, I wrote it a year ago right now, 350-page book on this guy who wakes up from routine eye surgery. And he looks at the doctor looks at him, and she, goes at his face, and it's basically him, getting out of one situation into another and trying to figure out why everybody wanted to kill him. So I mean, you get inspiration or ideas from everywhere.
Right. How long does it take to write a book for you?
Well, I have no social life, so it's just me. So I write during my day job. Then I go home at night and I'll knock out 2,000-3,000 words at night, which is not that hard to do. And it's like anything else you do. Larry Bird shoots 3,000 free throws a day. Tony Gwynn and Cal Ripken take 3,000 cuts a day. I mean, so you do it to a point. I mean, there are things that you do that I would look at you and go, I don't know how you do that. But for me, I've been writing longer than I've been doing anything else, and you can fall back on a rhythm that it's almost a subconscious thing that I just sit back and let the fingers work, and the words just seem to go from my brain to my hands.
How much of the day that you go through transcends into words on the page?
As far as like experiences
Yes.
Everything does. My life is an open book. I mean, I have some kind of mishap or something out on the street, it's a fanfare column.
Yeah.
I tell stories about growing up in fanfare. A lot of these books, this one is my, Locked Hearts is my first book.
Okay.
And this one is very autobiographical, so they say write what you know. And so the main character in this, I basically patterned after myself and my childhood and experiences. The character here named Sam played baseball. He was a writer, and then I kind of branched off and made him a widower instead of a divorced guy. So it's everything. When you write and you make your living with words, and it's not, I report on things that happen. I observe everything. One of my favorite pastimes is to go to the mall and just sit and watch people, or sit out on Lawrence Street and grab a sandwich and just watch people walk back and forth.
One thing I will say about you is that I've noticed, because I'm sure our viewers know this, that I've been on the, you and I swapping seats today. You're usually the interviewer, and it's usually me that's being interviewed by you.
Yeah.
And you're always very thoughtful about your questions. I mean, when I say thoughtful, you've done a lot of, I can tell they're just not some routine bunch of, well, I'm going to ask you these 10 questions, and you dress them up a little bit depending on what the article's about or what the situation is. But yours are always very thoughtful questions as you really try to engage not only the factual information, but the human side of it and how it affects people, and just really draw things in that you feel. And I get the feeling that you're asking things that if I was sitting there writing or reading a story, that I read one paragraph and say, well, boy, I hope he asks this question in the next paragraph. There it is. It's the next question. So you could tell that you have a lot of real insightful ways about you, the way that you look at situations and people, and people watching it obviously must be a fun thing for you.
It is. And as far as writing a news story, like I said, I've done this for a long, long time, for a plethora of publications, from a daily paper, which is what we have now, to a weekly paper 3 times a week, to even monthly magazines. And you have a different style for each publication. And coming from a weekly back to a daily was a real adjustment, because with a weekly paper we had the leeway to maybe make write a longer story that you don't have with a daily.
Dan, one thing I do want to say is that so many times an author gets an opportunity to write. When you're a reporter, you get a chance to write. People get to read what you write. But I appreciate the fact that you've come and given us an opportunity to kind of look behind the headlines, behind the words, and see the man that makes up the imagery that we read on a daily basis.
Well, I don't want to say egotistical thing, or it's a narcissistic thing that you read what I write, and that's a total rush for me.
Yeah.
Is to see, my name on the book or on the front page of the paper.
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's not work. It doesn't matter. My worst day writing for a newspaper is better than my best day working anywhere else.
I think that when people pick up, there's a reason why there's a funny paper strip in a newspaper. People like to have some humor in there. And I think that's why people enjoy reading your humor columns. I know you've won a number of awards for your humor. It's just another way of telling a story.
And I always say, never let the truth stand in the way of a good story, but I wish I could say I make most of this stuff up, and I don't. Most of the stuff has actually happened. And it's just, you write about people, and when you write about people, you can never go wrong.
I remember reading recently a story you told about going on vacation with your brother, and I won't go any deeper than that, but I just rolled because I could just, you painted such a vivid picture. I'm sitting there in my own mind just following the steps that went forth, and I said, yep, I can see that happening. I can see that happening.
And my brother still doesn't know that I wrote that. So he's about to, probably. So if he sees this, he's going to go fishing for it.
Have you thought about combining all those your humor columns into some sort of a synopsis type book where you put them all together?
I've thought about that, and the only thing that keeps me from doing that is that everybody out there who's ever written a column will put all their columns together in a book, and I don't want to fall into that. So what I've done is that in a lot of what I write, I take the columns and actually kind of marry them into the books. And that's a free 700-800 words. Anytime you can go back on an experience and draw from that and transition that into a story, a longer story than what would show up in a newspaper, that's 800 words you don't have to make up and write again.
It is. Like I was saying a minute ago, we appreciate your giving us an opportunity to see the real Dan Brown up close and personal, and to share a little bit about and you've certainly been very transparent with us today, and we appreciate that. Humor is a great thing. We appreciate you sharing that, and I will share this one point.
Okay.
I was leaving the office earlier, and one of the ladies in the office says, "Well, who are you interviewing today?" And I said, "Dan Brown." She said, "He is so funny."
Well.
So I said, "Well, I'll tell him you said that because."
Well, I appreciate that.
But and I know you do.
Yeah.
Because when you do things like that for people, and it's a labor of love, and we can tell that. We appreciate what you bring to Aiken. We appreciate your reporting for the Aiken Standard, and I know that there are going to be some folks that will want to take advantage of your books that are out there. I think after hearing your story and hearing a little bit about you, that they'll find it extremely interesting, and it's always good to read something after you've had a chance to surreptitiously meet somebody like this. So, Dan, thank you very much.
Well,
and again,
appreciate you having me.
D.P. Brown, Amazon.com.
Amazon.com.
You can find them. There are 7 out there with 1 to come.
1 to come, and I do about 3 a year. So when you asked, it takes me about maybe 6 to 8 weeks to write one.
Wow. Well, Dan, thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate you.
We enjoyed it. Thank you so
very
much.
much. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today, and we will see you again on Aiken Business Matters.